Silence between two people can reveal something that constant conversation often hides. When words stop flowing, the true emotional structure of the relationship slowly becomes visible. During normal interaction, people rely on explanations, jokes, distractions, and everyday talk to maintain connection. These exchanges can create the appearance of closeness, but they do not always reveal the deeper emotional foundation beneath them. When both individuals suddenly stop communicating, that comfortable layer disappears. What remains is the unseen framework that has been holding the relationship together. In that quiet space, each person begins to notice the emotional weight the other once carried in their life. The mind becomes aware of the absence. Small routines that once involved the other person suddenly feel incomplete. Silence removes the illusion that words alone sustain a bond. Instead, it exposes whether the connection exists beyond conversation. If the emotional structure is strong, the absence of communication does not immediately erase the presence of the other person in one's thoughts. The relationship continues to exist internally, showing that its roots extend deeper than daily interaction. At the same time, silence acts like a mirror placed gently before the mind. Without new conversations to focus on, attention naturally shifts inward. Each person begins to reflect on the nature of the relationship that once existed between them. Moments that were previously overlooked begin to reappear in memory. A simple exchange, a shared laugh, or even a misunderstanding suddenly takes on greater significance. This reflection is not forced. It happens naturally when the noise of communication disappears. The human mind has a tendency to fill empty space with meaning. In the quiet left by silence, thoughts begin organizing themselves around the emotional importance of the other person. This is why silence can sometimes feel heavier than conflict. Arguments still involve engagement, but silence removes that connection entirely. It leaves both individuals alone with their perception of the relationship. Through this process, the true emotional structure slowly becomes clearer. One begins to recognize whether the bond was built on genuine understanding or merely maintained by constant interaction. What makes this process powerful is that it unfolds quietly and often without intention. Neither person may plan to analyze the relationship, yet silence gently pushes them in that direction. It reveals patterns that were previously hidden beneath daily communication. One may begin to notice who usually initiated conversations, who carried emotional responsibility, or how misunderstandings were handled. These realizations are not always comfortable, but they are deeply revealing. Silence strips away the surface layer of interaction and leaves the individual face to face with the deeper reality of the connection. Through this quiet exposure, both people gain a clearer view of what truly existed between them. In this way, silence becomes more than the absence of sound. It becomes a moment of psychological clarity where the emotional architecture of the relationship quietly reveals itself. When communication between two people suddenly disappears, something subtle yet powerful begins to unfold inside the mind. The absence of conversation creates an unfamiliar quiet, and within that quiet, each individual is left alone with their own thoughts. Normally, daily exchanges act as a release valve for emotions and ideas. People express frustration, curiosity, excitement, or confusion through conversation, allowing feelings to move outward rather than remain inside. But when silence replaces dialogue, that outward movement stops. The mind begins to turn inward, searching for understanding in a space where no new information arrives. In this moment, both individuals are quietly pushed towards self-confrontation. Questions begin to appear that might have once been avoided. One may wonder what role they played in the relationship, what they truly felt, and whether their actions reflected their deeper intentions. This inward reflection can feel uncomfortable at first. because it removes the distractions that often keep deeper emotions hidden. Yet it also creates an opportunity for genuine self-awareness. Without the presence of the other person's voice, the mind begins to hear its own voice more clearly. Silence therefore becomes a doorway leading inward, encouraging each person to explore thoughts and emotions that once remained unnoticed beneath the surface of everyday communication. As this inner reflection continues, the mind naturally revisits past experiences shared with the other person. Memories do not appear randomly. They surface because the psyche seeks to understand unfinished emotional experiences. A conversation that once seemed ordinary may now return with surprising clarity. The tone of a voice, a small moment of hesitation, or a phrase spoken casually may suddenly carry deeper meaning. This process does not happen because the mind wishes to dwell on the past, but because it is attempting to organize emotions that were never fully understood in the moment they occurred. Silence provides the psychological space for this organization to happen. Without new interactions to focus attention outward, the mind begins carefully examining the emotional landscape of the relationship. In doing so, each individual gains insight not only into the connection they shared, but also into their own patterns of thinking and feeling. One may recognize personal fears, expectations, or habits that influenced how the relationship unfolded. This realization can be surprisingly illuminating. What once felt like a simple pause in communication slowly transforms into an internal journey. Through this quiet process, both individuals are guided toward deeper understanding of themselves, revealing emotions and motivations that constant conversation once kept hidden. When two people fall silent at the same time, another invisible force often rises quietly within them, the presence of pride and the protective nature of the ego. On the surface, the silence may appear simple, as if both individuals have merely chosen not to speak. Yet beneath that calm exterior, a subtle psychological tension begins to form. Each person may feel the natural impulse to reach out, to ask a question, or to reopen the door of communication. However, something within gently resists that impulse. The mind begins to weigh possibilities. One may wonder whether speaking first would appear as weakness, or whether the other person would even respond. This hesitation is not always driven by anger or resentment. More often, it is rooted in vulnerability. To break the silence requires exposure, and exposure can awaken the fear of rejection or misunderstanding. The ego steps forward as a guardian, convincing the individual that maintaining silence protects their dignity. In this way, pride quietly becomes a barrier that both individuals may be experiencing at the same time. Each waits, not necessarily because they wish to remain distant, but because they are protecting something fragile within themselves. The result is a delicate psychological balance where silence is maintained not by indifference, but by an invisible struggle between the desire for connection and the instinct for self-protection. As time passes, this inner conflict becomes more noticeable. The mind begins to revisit the moment when communication stopped, searching for clues that might justify the silence. One person may recall a misunderstanding and feel that the other should make the first move. The other may be thinking in exactly the same way. This mirrored reasoning often happens without either person realizing it. Both may believe they are standing firmly on principle, yet in reality they are standing on uncertainty. Pride gives the illusion of control, but beneath it lies a quiet question. What if the other person no longer cares enough to return? Because this question carries emotional risk, the ego encourages distance rather than vulnerability. It creates rational explanations that make silence appear logical. Yet the heart often recognizes something different. Even while the mind insists on maintaining distance, Moments of reflection may reveal a lingering connection that pride struggles to ignore. Over time, this silent standoff reveals an important truth about human relationships. Pride may protect the individual in the short term, but it also keeps genuine understanding out of reach. When silence is guided by the ego, both people remain trapped within their own interpretations of events. Neither can fully see the other's perspective because the bridge of communication remains closed. Yet this same silence can also become a moment of realization. As the mind reflects more deeply, one may begin to recognize how pride has shaped their response. This awareness does not immediately solve the situation, but it introduces a powerful shift in perspective. The individual begins to see that the silence was never only about the other person. It was also about the quiet struggle within themselves between the need to protect their identity and the deeper human desire to reconnect. In that recognition, the silence reveals its hidden lesson. When two people become silent at the same time, an unusual psychological process often begins to unfold beneath the surface of awareness. Even though communication has stopped, the connection between them does not disappear immediately. Instead, both individuals may begin to experience a form of emotional mirroring. Without realizing it, their thoughts and reflections can start moving along similar paths. One person may find themselves thinking about the relationship during quiet moments, wondering what the other person might be feeling or remembering. At that very same time, the other individual may be experiencing a similar reflection. This is not because they are communicating directly, but because meaningful human connections tend to leave strong impressions on the mind. When two people share experiences over time, their memories and emotions become linked in subtle ways. Silence does not erase those links instantly. Rather, it pushes them inward where they continue to exist within each person's inner world. The mind begins to revisit shared moments, almost as if trying to understand what remains unresolved. Through this quiet reflection, both individuals may unknowingly be processing the same emotional questions, even though neither one has spoken a single word. As this internal process continues, both people may begin noticing how frequently the other person appears in their thoughts, a place they once visited together, a routine moment during the day, or even a simple memory may suddenly bring the other person to mind. What makes this experience interesting is that it often happens unexpectedly. The mind does not deliberately search for these memories. Instead, they rise naturally from the deeper layers of the psyche where emotional connections are stored. This is where mirroring becomes more apparent. Even without communication, both individuals may be revisiting the same types of memories and emotional reflections. They may be questioning what went wrong, wondering what the other person truly felt, or simply recalling moments that once carried meaning. These reflections can create the feeling that the relationship is still somehow present, even in silence. The absence of conversation does not completely remove the emotional influence two people once had on each other. Instead, it reveals how deeply those experiences were woven into their inner lives. Over time, this silent mirroring highlights an important aspect of human connection. Relationships do not exist only in spoken words or daily interaction. They also exist within the psychological space each person carries inside their mind. When communication stops, that inner space becomes more noticeable. The thoughts, emotions, and memories connected to the other person begin to surface more clearly because nothing new is distracting the mind. Both individuals may begin to understand that the connection they shared has not simply vanished. It has shifted inward, becoming something each person quietly processes on their own. In this way, silence does not necessarily end the emotional dialogue between two people. Instead, it transforms that dialogue into a private reflection occurring within each mind. What once happened through conversation now unfolds through memory, thought, and quiet awareness. When silence settles between two people, emotions that once moved freely through conversation often begin to change their form. Words normally provide an outlet through which feelings can be shared, softened, or clarified. But when those words disappear, emotions no longer have an easy path outward. Instead, they begin to circulate quietly within the mind. This internal movement can make feelings appear stronger than they once seemed. A thought that might have been expressed in a brief message or a simple conversation now remains unspoken, and because it stays inside, it gathers more attention. The mind returns to it repeatedly, trying to understand what it means. In this way, silence slowly amplifies emotional awareness. People begin noticing reactions within themselves that they might have overlooked before. A small sense of regret, a quiet curiosity, or even a lingering appreciation for certain moments can begin to feel more vivid. Silence does not create these emotions. It simply removes the distractions that once kept them hidden beneath everyday interaction. Without constant dialogue, the inner emotional world becomes clearer and more noticeable. As time passes, memories connected to those emotions often begin to surface with surprising clarity. The mind tends to revisit moments that still carry unresolved meaning. A brief conversation, a shared experience, or even a moment of misunderstanding can return to awareness in a new light. What once seemed ordinary may now appear significant. This does not happen because the mind wants to exaggerate the past, but because silence provides the space needed for deeper reflection. Without new exchanges to shift attention elsewhere, the mind naturally studies the emotional traces left behind by the relationship. Each memory becomes part of a quiet process of understanding. One may begin to ask simple yet meaningful questions. Why did that moment feel important? What was truly meant during that conversation? How did the relationship shape certain feelings or expectations? These reflections unfold slowly and often without intention. The individual may simply notice that certain thoughts keep returning, inviting them to examine emotions that were never fully understood at the time they occurred. Through this process, silence gradually reveals an important truth about human emotions. Feelings do not disappear simply because they are not spoken. In many cases, they grow more visible when external noise fades away. The absence of conversation allows emotions to stand alone, without explanation or distraction. This can make them feel more intense, but it also makes them easier to recognize. People begin to understand what truly mattered to them within the relationship. They may realize which moments carried genuine meaning and which ones were less important than they once believed. In this way, silence becomes a form of emotional clarification. It does not force decisions or demand conclusions, but it gently encourages awareness. By allowing emotions to rise and be observed without interruption, silence gives both individuals the opportunity to understand their inner responses more clearly. What seemed like an empty space between two people slowly becomes a place where emotional truth begins to surface. When silence enters a relationship, it often creates a kind of distance that feels uncomfortable at first. Two people who were once used to exchanging thoughts and experiences suddenly find themselves moving through life without that familiar interaction. Yet, within this distance, something important begins to develop quietly. The energy that once flowed outward through conversation now has nowhere to go except inward. Instead of focusing on the other person's reactions, attention slowly shifts toward the self. This inward movement can lead to a period of reflection that rarely happens during constant communication. In everyday interaction, people respond quickly, often without deeply examining their own motivations or feelings. Silence interrupts that pattern. It slows the rhythm of emotional exchange and allows the individual to observe their own thoughts more carefully. One may begin to notice how certain reactions were shaped by expectations, fears, or habits that were never questioned before. In this sense, the distance created by silence does not simply separate two people. It creates space for self-observation. The individual starts to see themselves more clearly, recognizing patterns of behavior that once blended into the background of daily life. As this reflection continues, the person may begin to reconsider moments from the past with a new perspective. Without the pressure of immediate interaction, the mind has time to explore situations that once seemed confusing or emotionally intense. A disagreement that once felt overwhelming may now appear more understandable. An action that once seemed justified might be viewed with greater honesty. This shift in perception does not happen because the person is trying to judge themselves harshly, but because silence provides the calm necessary for deeper thinking. When people are constantly responding to one another, there is little opportunity to pause and question the deeper meaning behind their reactions. Distance changes that dynamic. It allows the individual to examine their behavior without the emotional urgency that once surrounded it. Through this process, small insights begin to appear. One might recognize personal strengths that helped sustain the relationship, or realize certain habits that made communication more difficult. Each realization becomes part of a gradual process of personal growth that unfolds quietly over time. Eventually, this inward reflection can lead to a subtle transformation in how the individual understands relationships altogether. Instead of seeing the silence only as a loss or interruption, one may begin to recognize it as a period of learning. The absence of